Well, welcome to NASCAR Roundup. It's too cold. Anyways, this is Unpopular Opinions, and you just got about 45 seconds of them. I'm Ryan Tofil. I'm here with Bryan Chai. There being some dials adjusted on the other side. I don't know if that's a good sign. We have a lost episode from last week that we recorded and no audio was captured from. And so we had the idea, let's just watch it and then dub over it. But we just decided to record a whole new show. So this is Bryan Chai in his is that like a serious brony shirt?
Oh, not really. I've never seen an episode, but the shirt is very comfortable.
Okay, yeah, he's wearing comfy shirt. Mine says keep calm and barbecue. Depending on how you're taking this in, you baby, because 4th of July is coming up. And, everyone's going to be out on the grills. It is going to be hot where we are, so I don't know if I'm going to make it out on the grill at like 1 p.m.
Ugh, that's like the hottest part of the day.
Yeah, dude. Oh, boy, that's going to be brutal. But if I was staying inside, what I could do is watch WWE all day. And what Bryan Chai said in our lost episode is that WCW was and is much greater than WWE will ever be.
Whoa, I never said that.
He said that they should have won the Monday Night. They should have won the Monday Night Wars. And even if you don't like wrestling, don't turn it off. Let me tell you why this is so important, because just wrestling is such an, albeit lowbrow, representation of like where society is at the moment, because they have to produce, it's like the nightly news, the amount of new content they're producing per week. It absolutely incredible. I mean, WWE, when there's no pay-per-view, there's 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, and 1 hour of NXT.
Another out, and they have a bunch of other shows.
205 Live.
Yep.
And this is all new original content every week. So whether you like wrestling or not, you have to at least admit that it's impressive how they're able to produce this much content to entertain these admittedly low IQ barbarians.
I believe I've heard WWE described as redneck anime.
Yeah. What I would describe is when I'm trying to justify myself is like, okay, I'll watch WWE, but I'm still a reasonable member of society and shouldn't be looked down upon. I describe it as like theater for sports or play or something, like, just some may say that it is already, but like if in NBA or NFL, if like the most entertaining thing that could possibly happen always does happen because it's scripted.
Yes. I mean, compared to like, the best boxing card in the world, if every fight ends in a first round knockout, you're really not getting your money's worth. Obviously I'm not comparing real sports to wrestling, but with wrestling, you're getting your money's worth. You're getting a full 3 hours. If you find it entertaining,
right,
you're getting your full 3 hours worth.
And the Monday Night Wars, like, I don't know if we have ever seen anything like it. I mean, you might have to, I mean, the NFL and AFL merged and the NBA and ABA merged. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I can think of any like sports companies that like put one another out of business, but what these guys were doing was going up against each other in the same time slot in the 1990s, and they were like the exact same show or type of show being produced by different companies, and really there was only a big enough audience to support one of them.
Yeah.
At least on national television. I mean, there's some arguments to be made. If you've ever watched the official Monday Night War documentary, Diamond Dallas Page claims that WCW was still TNT's highest rated program when it was canceled. And at the end of WCW's run, they were pulling in this about the same numbers they were as when they were starting, but WWF, or I don't know when, if it was still WWF at the time, was now double or triple what its audience used to be. And the WCW was bought out by Vince McMahon, and it's just an extremely interesting scenario because you had these two companies going after each other, and just the strategy of it, and how each wrestler was treated in each company. I mean, literally at the risk of extinction, and you can totally take the sports entertainment or wrestling aspect out of it if you want to. And it's still an extremely fascinating story. Like, this scenario could be about competing freaking beekeepers or gardeners, and I still think that it would be extremely interesting, the way that everything played out. Maybe you'll be better at giving a little better summary.
I mean, think of it like this: like, just the difficulty of producing a live television show in and of itself. I mean, that's a tall task. But then you hear about some of these kind of guerrilla tactics that, like WCW at one point, I think I saw in a documentary that they were watching WWF at the time live and literally rewriting their script, like, as on the fly. Like, that as someone who writes a little bit, that is an insane amount of pressure to just come up with new content on the fly, real time counter programming. Honestly, we may never see real-time counter-programming ever again in television. I mean, with the advent of streaming, like, everything's on Netflix now, so you can watch at your leisure. There's very little in terms of, live television that's competing head-to-head.
Maybe the closest I can think of is, like, every news network out there, whether it's local or national or indie or online only, covers the presidential election, and I'm sure that Fox is keeping an eye on what CNN is saying about it.
Yeah, but even that, that's, I mean, the news by definition, they're having content handed to them, and it's their job to repackage it.
Okay.
With pro wrestling, it is all original content that they have to come up with on the fly. Like, that is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, just like us trying to come up with original content. LeBron signed with the LA Lakers, and we're not going to talk about it on the show. So, we're working pretty hard to come up with content that is not just talking about LeBron leaving Cleveland this week. So we decided to talk about these Monday Night Wars, and the show is really living up to its name today. Unpopular Opinions. Bryan Chai saying that WCW was better and always will be better than WWF. Scott Steiner, wrestler number one all time.
One of my favorites, until he yelled at me when I was a kid.
Okay, who's Scott Steiner?
Scott Steiner is one of the Steiner brothers. Legit athletes. They both were amateur wrestlers at the University of Michigan.
One of the Steiner brothers.
That was the name of their tag team.
Who's Wayne Gretzky? It is one of those Gretzky boys.
All right, that was the name of their tag team, the Steiner brothers.
Okay.
But real life athletes, they were both standout amateur wrestlers at the University of Michigan. And I was a huge fan when I was a kid.
Okay, didn't you say something about him ruining your life?
Yeah, well, I met him, and he was kind of a jerk in real life.
Well, what happened? Like, okay, you can just say Scott Steiner is kind of a jerk. Tell us the story.
So I saw him. I believe he was in Hawaii at the time. I think just probably on vacation or something.
Which is where you grew up.
Yes, born and raised. And yeah, I saw him. He was at the beach. It was the beach or the pool. I'm kind of mixing stories in my head together. But either way, he was in an aquatic-based recreation area. And I ran, little kid, ran up to him, flexed my muscles like he does, and yelled out his catchphrase, something about like "Big Papa Pump is your hookup," something along those lines. And then he squirted me with a water ball and told me to go away, and told me he was on vacation.
Oh, Scott Steiner, who? What year about would this have been?
Probably late 90s.
Late 90s. Who is an active wrestler in TNA today? So he's got to be old now. It seemed like he was old. He's just an old-looking guy, no matter how... He got an old face.
Yes.
Boy, I hope that doesn't get back to him, because if you see how I'm built compared to how he's built...
I mean, he's definitely stronger than you, but you could probably run circles around him. I don't know about his cardio.
Yeah, boy. He may be like the biggest... I don't know. What do you think as far as just like pure awesome muscles? Or if him, Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, I was just about to say
Lex Luger.
Warrior's up there. Luger's out there. Oh, man, it's crazy to see what Luger looks like today. He battled some real drug problems, and he's like rail thin now.
Yeah, but he had like a stroke or something.
Yeah. He had some other health issues too.
Plus, his wife or girlfriend at the time, Miss Elizabeth, who was famous for her endeavors with Macho Man Randy Savage, was married to Macho Man in real life, literally died in front of Luger.
Yeah.
And kind of changed him a little bit. Lex Luger is a good starting point, though, because he was on the very first episode ever of WCW Monday Nitro.
Yeah, he was. Oh, man, that was a rough episode. It was filmed in the Mall of America, of all places, and you can see, like, just random shoppers going up and down escalators in the background. Yeah. But, man, seeing Luger, especially because Luger was just on WWE programming when he jumped ship, so it was surreal, especially, I believe it was 90...
I want to say 94, which I would have been 2 years old. I don't know at what age you started wrestling, but you're...
Pretty young. My grandma loved it, so I watched it with her growing up.
Were you watching in 94?
Yes.
Okay, so who were you at the time? Like, was WCW a thing for kids? Or that was pretty much the old boys down south would watch that and the kids were WWF fans?
No, we loved them both. We all, as a kid, I had my favorite wrestlers, and WWF at the time, it was Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. Thought they were really cool. And then in WCW, it was Sting. Like, he was the man to me. I loved Sting.
So, like, if you're 6 years old or whatever, were you understanding that these were, like, separate things just doing the same thing, or like what?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of thought of it as like I believe a good childhood analogy for me would be the old children, Power Rangers versus Big Bad Beetleborgs.
Okay,
same general concept.
I don't know who Big Bad Beetleborgs.
Google it. It is a horrendous show. I went back and watched it recently.
Why didn't you pick something like Battletoads or Thundercats?
Oh, okay. So what was it? Street Sharks and Ninja Turtles? Same idea. Same idea. Okay. But yeah, no, as a kid, I loved them both.
So which one was Street Sharks and which one was Ninja Turtles?
I mean, I guess WWE is the Ninja Turtles. They're still alive and kicking. I don't know too many people who remember who the Street Sharks are.
Yeah. You're right. Nobody cares about the Street Sharks. That's for sure. I can say that definitively. But in these Monday Night Wars, what happened was these two companies had their shows on at the exact same time, and they were going up against one another throughout the 1990s, and they both aired at 9 o'clock on Monday nights.
Yep.
And you couldn't watch both of them. I mean, I guess you could tape one of them at that point.
Yep.
But, there's no DVR and there's no internet to watch it the next day in 1995.
Yeah, no streaming services
right.
yet.
So these companies were competing against each other. And what happened was WCW signs all of what they considered to be the biggest stars over from WWF. I mean,
at the time they were, definitely.
I mean, at least 5 I can think of to kickstart the Monday Night Wars, which would be Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Lex Luger, Randy Savage.
Yes. I believe Hogan was the very first. That was kind of the first big domino to fall.
Right, because he had been out of wrestling for a little while.
Filming classic films like Thunder in Paradise.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that was later on. No, I believe he was filming...
No, Thunder in Paradise.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think he was on the set of Thunder in Paradise when Ric Flair and Eric Bischoff went and talked to him. convince him to come back to the arena.
But I mean, the real spark for WCW was obviously the NWO. Even if you had no interest in wrestling, if you grew up in that period, you saw people wearing the black and white NWO shirts.
Yeah, I mean, whether it was to school or something, I mean, you could be watching sports on TV and people would have NWO shirts on because the people that were watching it, I don't think it was just like a normal fan of a TV show. Like, that was such a big thing.
Yeah, it had legitimate cultural heft at the time.
So then going through the 90s, basically the WWF, they were stripped of their talent and had to build from within, while the WCW, sponsored by Ted Turner, could just sign anyone they want. And to get all of what they thought to be the best wrestlers at the time, or at least the biggest names, they gave them outrageous contracts.
Guaranteed money
without necessarily having to work for it. Like, you didn't have to wrestle to get paid. You got paid per month or whatever. And then if you could or decided you wanted to, if you were a big enough bopper during those days, then you would go out there and I guess just have a little fun, And WWF had to build from within because Ted Turner could just afford to buy all these stars and, give them these contracts. So the WCW had to make these contracts more appealing to the wrestlers than WWF was. I mean, I still think that the WWE guys are probably a little overworked. Like,
oh yeah, I definitely think wrestling needs an off season. No doubt.
when you look at like what these guys are putting their bodies through, and then maybe like do away with the house shows or something. Like, I can't like.
But I mean, those generate so much money. Like, I mean, they do so many of them. But going back to the WCW contracts real quick. The
WCW contracts, right?
The other big issue, and it turned in, it was funny because at the time it was such a big selling point. I mean, yes, the guaranteed money was legit, but they also put creative control into those contracts, which at the time attracted those big names. Ultimately, it was their downfall because, can you imagine if, I don't know, Big Bang Theory, if they let like the main characters, do whatever they, have final creative say, like that just doesn't work.
Yeah, Sheldon's like, I'm banging Penny. There's nothing you can do about it. Everyone's like, LOL, Chardon. Oh man, you like the Big Bang Theory?
It's all right.
I'd rather watch wrestling.
I think I would too. But so going back to WCW real quick. They lavished these guys big contracts, but again, the big flashpoint for WCW was the NWO, which is lost to history, was not their original idea. It actually is an idea that originated in New Japan Pro Wrestling. But WCW,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, WCW kind of put it in the mainstream, and they kind of took off from there. But so you've been accusing me that I've said WCW is the greatest thing ever, which is not true. I said they could have won the Monday Night Wars.
I don't think they had any shot.
There was a legitimate okay, so I think the first real kind of downturn for them was when Sting went from, California Surfer, bright colored dude to the Crow ripoff.
I mean, people love the Crow.
No. The Crow was great. That was a great evolution of Sting. The problem was they had such an intense build up to Sting versus Hogan. Like, that was the feud for the belt. Like, that was a real big deal. And then Starrcade 96 or 97, they finally had the big match for the championship on the biggest show of the year.
It wasn't 96 because Bret Hart was involved in the match.
So it was 97 for sure. It wasn't 98. 98 was Goldberg-Nash.
Okay, then it was 97.
So 97, big main event. I know Starrcade 97 did just gangbusters and pay-per-view buy rates. Like, people legitimately wanted to see that. But, and this is where that creative control comes in, Hogan did not want to put Sting over clean, which in wrestling terms means he didn't want to let Sting win fair and square.
In a way that anybody could look at it and just go, oh, Sting must be better than Hogan.
Yeah, so Hogan kiboshed, I mean, that's how the story's supposed to go. At the end of the day, pro wrestling is, a trope about good versus evil, and good guys usually win at the end. That didn't happen with Sting and Hogan.
So you're saying Hogan didn't really he never been the bad guy before. Yeah. So, he, I guess, just didn't want to do what the bad guy has to do, and at like the climax lose.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, then that was the first, because that should have been WCW's crowning moment of the 90s. Sting beating Hogan who'd been champ for like over a calendar year. And instead Sting won, but it was just with shenanigans. Bret Hart was the referee.
Yeah, well, okay, so what Hogan's side of that, what I've read, is that Sting showed up after 16 months ready to wrestle for the first time, and he was out of shape and didn't seem into it. So Hogan was upset that this guy he didn't think was going to put on a good match, and it was going to make him look really weak to lose to him if Sting wasn't in that great of shape. So that's what Hogan and maybe Bischoff said. So what they planned is that Sting was going to get pinned, but the referee was going to count too fast, and then they would have to restart the match. So with some shenanigans, like you said, and Bret Hart come in and be the referee. But as you told in the story, it did take shenanigans and looked even worse because the referee did a normal count. So it looked like Sting had been the good guy who was just beaten and then started getting like whiny about it. And
it was just bad. And I thought it really killed Sting's momentum. Yes, he got the belt. He dropped it back to Hogan a few months later. But to me, like, if they had given Sting that legitimate iconic moment at their biggest pay-per-view of the year, and gone forward from there with more stable booking, I think that would have been a big thing. Instead, what ended up happening there was the NWO was just taking over the storyline, and then eventually they split into the black and white and the red and black NWO factions. And then from, and just, I'm going to skip forward to Starrcade 98, which at that point, Bill Goldberg, who again, as a kid, I was 10 years old in 98. Yeah. Bill Goldberg was the coolest thing ever. Just this juggernaut, destroying people. He had this crazy win streak, 176-0 or something like that.
Yeah, it was.
And then,
high inflated number, yeah.
Yes. I mean, it was definitely inflated. But, fast forward, and again, Starrcade, biggest show of the year, main event slot for the world title. Bill Goldberg, his streak is snapped because Kevin Nash, now exercising his creative control, had himself win, and it was, again, with shenanigans. Scott Hall tasered Bill Goldberg.
That was at Starrcade.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, I wasn't watching at that time, especially not, watching pay-per-views.
But it was kind of like, the old, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice. Or no, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah, so people were sick and tired of it.
Yeah, this is two mega pay-per-views in a row, two of their biggest shows in a row, where just shenanigans, just poor booking, creative control rearing its ugly head. If those had gone differently, I think WCW would have had a lot of momentum. Because by 98, WWF was kind of getting back into the game. Yeah. WCW had gone on a string of like 90, 80-something straight weeks.
I think 96?
96 straight weeks of winning the ratings.
I could be wrong, but that's a number that's jumping out at me.
Man, just WCW had this momentum, but just every time on the biggest possible stage, they'd screw it up. Like, you could pinpoint the exact moments where, they really dropped the ball. Like, I'm not even... I know one of the big knocks is when Goldberg won the belt, it was a match on just Nitro, like free TV. It wasn't even a pay-per-view.
I really don't have a problem with that.
Yeah,
I mean,
neither do I.
I think that if you're trying to get people to watch things, the pay-per-views could almost be a little bit of a bonus for the hardcore fans. But if you never show anybody anything on regular television, people aren't going to be interested. I can tell you that there is no way in a million years that I would buy any WWE pay-per-view these days.
Yeah, I mean, well, you have the network.
Yeah, I mean, but I would not be watching it if it wasn't for the network.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So number one, if WWE hadn't kept screwing up at the biggest possible moment, I think that would have changed things. And also, another issue with creative control is that none of the old guys want to give up their spot. Like, you're a headliner, you're a main eventer. Right. Why would you want to give up your spot when you don't have to? When you literally have in your contract, you do not have to give that spot up.
Yeah, I mean, when they signed Randy Savage in 94 or 95, it didn't occur to them that creative control would still be holding true in 99.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it feels like WCW, that's the other knock. WCW, I think they had some legitimate homegrown talent like Diamond Dallas Page, Bill Goldberg, and yet it was always a Hogan, a Nash.
Yeah.
Those guys in the top spots because they didn't have to give those spots up.
Yeah. Okay, so where I'm going to argue against you is the things that made WCW more popular than WWF was because it was Hogan and Nash and Scott Hall. Like that's how they took the lead of WWF. So it's like a paradox. If you're like, well, why aren't they showing anybody other than Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan? Well, that's how they got the lead, because people wanted to see those guys. And why do they give them such creative control and ridiculous contracts that they couldn't support? Well, it's because that's what WCW had to do to get those guys over from WWF onto their show, and WCW would have never taken the lead if they didn't do those things.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think the guaranteed money would have been enough because, again, in WWF, guys were wrestling, they were being paid per, wrestling event. So the guaranteed money was a big deal. I also know WCW's work schedule was also a big thing because they didn't run nearly as many house shows. I really don't think they needed the creative control. But the point being, yes, they brought these guys in to take the lead. But, to use a sports analogy, even when you're winning now, you want to use the back end of your roster to develop younger talent that can eventually, replace the starters.
Yeah.
They did it, but they couldn't replace the starters because the starters refused to go. That's the crazy thing. They legitimately, I know guys like, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Chris Jericho, Rey Mysterio. They weren't homegrown per se. They were all poached from ECW.
Right.
But man, those guys are all great wrestlers, and they were on the roster all at the same time. And, Jericho and Guerrero could go out and wrestle an amazing 20-minute match. And the whole time the announcers are talking about, what's Hogan and Nash going to do in the main event? It was just counterproductive to their success.
Yeah, I think some of the most just like exciting wrestling moments that were about wrestling. I mean, you could talk about Mick Foley falling off the top of a Hell in a Cell, or the Hardy Boys going off a ladder, something like that. But that's like more just daredevil instead of technical wrestling. Guerrero and Malenko in ECW was probably like some of the most fast paced and just like exciting.
Yeah. No one had seen that at the time in America.
Right. And I never thought that I could be watching two naked, greased up guys grabbing each other and being like, wow, like that's really impressive. But the way they would like move, and man, just the way that they would like interact with each other. I know this is gonna sound weird, but like their bodies when they're like flipping and stuff, like the one guy's got to be turning like his upper body when the other one's like moving his legs, because that's the way they're rotating. And it was almost like when they were holding or something, they would become like one or like liquid, and it was like just so athletic looking. And those were some really impressive matches with Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero.
I mean, I want to mention Chris Benoit too, but that's kind of a dark spot.
Yeah, I don't know if you... Well, hang on. Chris Benoit, one thing that I found... or I find interesting about him is he did murder his wife and kids.
That's not what you find interesting, though.
No, what I find interesting is he murdered his wife and kids, and before that, he was the only guy in wrestling that would allow himself to be hit in the back of the head with objects
at the base of the skull
with steel chairs. Nowadays, you can't hit anybody in the head at all, but at the time, you were not allowed to hit wrestlers in the back of the head with things. That was where they drew the line, except for Chris Benoit. I was like, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in hindsight, everything with Benoit is just terrible, terrible tragedy. But if you look at just his body of work as a professional wrestler,
Wolverine.
He, again, like WCW had all this talent that they developed at the back end of the roster, and they couldn't do anything with it. Like that, and then those guys started jumping to WWF. Exactly, where there was more opportunity, and I mean that's why I say WCW could have won the Monday Night Wars. I mean, obviously something like Creative Control, you can't just snap your fingers and be like, what if that never happened? Yeah, but WCW did a lot of good things that a lot of people don't give them credit for. I mean, they were the first ones to go live on Monday nights. WWF at the time was pre-taped. But yeah, just, they had all this talent. They developed it well, but they just didn't have a top spot for them. And by the time they tried to change it, it was too little too late. Like, people had jumped ship. Yeah. Boy, I don't remember what the buy rate for their last ever pay-per-view was, but that was not good. That was Greed. And I think I remember reading on Wikipedia that it was attended by like 5,000. Yeah. Something like that. By the end of WCW, like I was seeing stories that they were literally giving away tickets for the camera side seats. Right. So they could at least, they would tarp off half the arena. Yeah. Put everyone on the camera side and make it seem like it was a full house. Mm-hmm. But yeah, man. WCW, I think now, to the victor goes the spoils, and the victor is the one who writes the history books. Yeah. So they are passed off as this like bumbling Southern promotion that didn't know what it was doing. They didn't know what they were doing. They just made some critical mistakes. Yeah, I mean they put on what were at the time the most watched wrestling shows ever. Yeah. In the history of, I'm assuming, the world. I don't know. Maybe I just imagine the sheer amount of people in America would mean that even with the lower percentages of Americans watching, that would be better than like Japan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think you're right. Japan, who knocked out of the World Cup today by a 94th minute goal from Belgium. Belgium with the dagger, yeah. Yeah, Bryan Chai very upset. Well, hey, South Korea won their last game. They just didn't qualify for the next round. But kind of pivoting off of... he's going to pivot. Off of WCW real quick. Let's name other things we like that start with W. Whataburger, wiffle ball. Waffles. Waffles are great. I like Charleston Chews. They don't start with W's, though. I've never had a Charleston Chew. Oh, man, dude. They're getting harder to find, but they're good. What is it? Is it chocolate? It's like a nougat or a taffy. It's like nougat taffy in chocolate. Huh. Go ahead and pivot off WCW. Well, I mean, it's not really a full pivot. It's a tangential. I think another reason WCW had all that momentum at the time was their N64 game, WCW NWO Revenge, which at the time was just... I know you're not a big fan of the N64 wrestling games, if I'm not mistaken. I believe... I'm not a big fan of that era in general, and I think I've talked about this before, is because everything went to 3D before 3D looked good enough for me to understand what's going on the screen. Yeah. Everything's too blocky and blends together, and I would have rather that they went with sprites for that generation, and once they started to figure out how to make things look about as good as they were on the Dreamcast or PS2, then start using 3D and polygons and stuff. But I prefer
sprites up until that point, because like try to play a Madden game and you can't tell what's going on because there's 22 guys out there and they all look the same, and like the linemen are just like jumbled together because it looks more like the shape of a human, I guess,
than actual resembling a human.
Yeah, but I mean, like back in the days of sprites, I feel like I could always tell what was going on. And now the camera's 3D. That's cool, but I can't really make out what I'm looking at.
Oh, definitely. Like I agree with you. And let's stick with this for a while, because I do want to talk about how games from like the Super Nintendo have aged so much better than games on the N64.
Yeah.
Despite the N64 being, you know, however many years newer.
I think it's because of what I just said.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you. Like, sprites have aged so well. Like, then a well hand-drawn sprite in a video game is going to look good in 1994 and 2024.
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna look good. Man, those N64 graphics were rough. But WCW NWO Revenge, it was a revolutionary game at the time. Like,
okay, so during that time, there were 3 released from each company.
No, it was
there was like,
I think there was the WCW before Revenge, but Revenge.
There's WCW versus NWO.
I think that's Revenge.
Okay, that might be Revenge. There's WCW Mayhem.
That's something else. There were a ton of wrestling video games that came out back then.
That's something else. I'm like,
I think that was on the PS1 years later. Like that. Like there was.
No, dude. It's got Bill Goldberg on the front. It was after they switched to WCW from the classic like big yellow to like the stupid small blue.
Yeah.
Oh man, I hate that logo.
Yeah, the classic WCW logo is great. It's just,
Anyways, you're saying that was the best wrestling game?
I prefer WWF No Mercy, another N64 wrestling game, but at the time it was awesome.
Was No Mercy before or after WrestleMania 2000?
After. So there was the WCW game that we can't remember. So they're all built on the same engine. AKI, I don't know how to pronounce that company's name, but there was the first WCW one, Revenge, WrestleMania 2000, and then No Mercy. But just, man, those games were so much fun. I mean, I'm sure if I went back and played them now, they'd probably be
I've
terrible.
tried, man.
They're probably not good.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Like, they're so slow, and you, like, lumber up to the guy, and then you go like that, and you lock onto him where their arms, it's like, they're so rigid. You know what I mean? And, like, their elbows are never bent at any angle other than 90. And like, it's freaking brutal, dude. But WWF Royal Rumble on the Super Nintendo might that's my favorite wrestling game.
Yeah. See, I don't know if I ever played that one, because I remember on the Super Nintendo I was, big on Mario and stuff like that. I may have skipped the Royal Rumble, because the first wrestling game I remember is WWF WrestleMania, the arcade game. It was just this dumb. It was so dumb.
It had Vince McMahon commentating, and then it came out on Genesis and Super Nintendo. Excuse me.
I remember playing on the PS1. I think I played it when it came on.
WWF in Your House.
That must have been it. But that's the one where like Bret Hart would shoot lasers out of his eyes.
Yeah. So the sequel to that for the next gen, which pretty much had the same graphics and stuff, was In Your House.
Yes.
Which it was like, maybe they came out with WrestleMania the arcade game for PS1, but In Your House, to me, was the same, except it had new characters, and then the backgrounds were like places other than just an arena.
Yeah. But man, it is crazy to think of how far wrestling games have come since then.
Just games in general, but I do agree with you that the graphics from 1991, if you're not talking about Star Fox, look better than the graphics from 1997. Like Super Mario World, like Mario, he still looks, you can just see a picture of Mario and how he looked in his 16-bit days, and he still just looks like crisp and clean and classic. Mm-hmm. And Mario and Peach, like on N64, they it's just like, I don't know.
There's a distinct lack of heart character in their designs.
Yes, and I just had to be careful with my words, because I don't know who's going to be listening to this in the future. But I almost got real derogatory about Mario. They're, yeah, it's just not as fun. So
I mean, not to sound like a rambling old man about the good old days, but
they used to lock up like this, and they would just be holding them, and they put their heads down.
And yeah, in those N64 games. I also remember there was this weird thing in Revenge, like in the WWF,
in the chair.
Yeah, in the WWF N64 games, they at least tried to like their arms were normal, but in WCW, everyone's arms were just stuck like this.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
they were just stuck like this, like at all times. I'm like,
right.
Okay. Still love the game though at the time.
Yeah, maybe in preparation next week we'll go back through and try to play any N64 games we can get our hands on. Wrestling, not just all of them. I did just buy a game from a shop like an hour away, dude. I was so upset.
Oh boy.
I bought Super Mario Sunshine, $28. I got home and it didn't even work. And it was like an hour away. They're like, oh, bring it back within a week. I was like, it's an hour. It's an hour, like $28. It's not that much, but it's still like, it's not enough to make me be like, okay, I'm driving an hour one way. Yeah. Tonight, but it's not so little where I'm like, oh, I'm not worried about it. You know what I mean?
I mean,
I'm like sweating from my knees because I got so upset over that. My knees are moist, dude.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's kind of why? I mean, changing subject just very slightly. Do you think that's kind of why?
I think that's why cartridge-based things are going to last longer than CDs, discs, or...
Well, I was going to actually say, like, do you think that's why, like, physical brick-and-mortar game shops are dying slowly? Like, everyone buys stuff digitally, and you know when you buy stuff digitally, it's gonna work. I mean, like, 99% of the time, it's going to work.
Yeah. You know, I think people have gotten liberal enough with their passwords and their game sharing and stuff where, like, one person buying the game means that two or more people can also then play it, which you cannot do with a disc. I mean, my best friend lives in New York. We can't mail the disc back and forth to, you know, so anything new I'm buying digitally.
Yeah.
It definitely is frustrating. Like those NES and SNES and N64 cartridges are tanks, and Genesis. Like I've had way more discs stop working that are 10 years newer than SNES games.
I mean, there was that whole era where it was when they first started using CDs, but before, like, Blu-ray discs are pretty sturdy, but when they were like actual CD-ROMs, those things, like, you get one nick on the back, on the data side, it's not going to work.
Yes, I mean, so I think PS1 era was CD, and then PS2 was DVD.
Yeah.
And then starting with Xbox 360 was DVD, PS3 was Blu-ray.
Yeah.
And now they're both Blu-ray. Xbox One is Blu-ray, right?
Yeah. Or at least, yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
But
I'm out of juice.
But yeah, so just the going back to like the mom and pop, the brick and mortar stores, it does feel like a part of my childhood that I don't think
like you're never gonna walk into Funko Land again.
Yeah, like I mean, I can't imagine, like, you know, I want to be a dad one day. I feel like
good luck, dude. You got to get a date first.
No comment. But you know,
he's like, married.
Yep.
That was the joke, yeah.
But yeah, like, I don't think my kids aren't gonna know what it's like. Like, I had so much fun as a kid going into like a GameStop and just, you know, sifting through the used games. Like, just, I had such a ball as a kid doing that, and that's just not something I don't think, you know, any future potential kids are really gonna know about.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, maybe it's been because these games are now being offered digitally that the brick and mortar market is now only 50% of what it used to be, but nobody wants to give their games back in because I'll keep a game instead of getting $3 from it from GameStop. Like, I'm not going to give them any of my stuff for them to then turn around and sell to anybody else when they're giving me such small amounts of it. And, you know, maybe I'll buy way more stuff off of eBay than I do going into those stores. I mean, I'm a little bit worried. I started getting into game collecting seriously, where I started buying the games that were hundreds of dollars right as they've reached their peak, and games have kind of leveled off in the last 2 or 3 years, where up until that point when I started buying, Hagane, the Final Conflict for SNES it never stopped going up, and Mega Man X3 never stopped going up, and Flintstones, whatever the frick your expensive title is on NES, never stopped. But then people stopped collecting to play the games, and they started collecting to try to trade for profit, and they started collecting to hold on to them. And like the prices just became so outrageously high that people just don't want to do it anymore. Like, I am not going to pay $600 for a game anymore, because I don't think that that's the future of the market. As soon as Nintendo gets there, look, Nintendo, you see how much these games are being sold for. You know how many people want to play Hagane but feel like they never will because the cartridge is $600? You have, are Nintendo, the console the game was released for, put it on the digital marketplace and make it like a special edition, or like an ultimate package or whatever, and charge people $10 for it instead of $7. I will pay $7 or $10 for a game instead of emulating it.
Yeah.
I do think that I'm a little bit more prone to paying for things than a millennial. Like, I don't like streaming anything illegally. I guess it's maybe just being in like a media genre of work, and my first major in college was video editing and stuff like. So I understand how much work goes into that, and it sucks that the leading man is getting $30 million to make this movie, but there are plenty of people making $40,000 working behind the scenes on it, and that's like who I feel like I'm supporting when I pay for these things. So I'm more likely, I think, if something's available on the digital console for $7, I'll pay Nintendo to play it because they deserve it, because they created something I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pay this game store. I was in a game store, this same store that sold me Super Mario Sunshine, that had reproduction labels on Little Samson and Flintstone's Treasure or whatever, and they had them marked for like $1,200 each.
That's insane.
And like, I know my stuff. I don't know anyone who's not a collector that's gonna buy those things, but me, like, I've done my research and stuff. Like, those reproduction labels lower the value of the cartridge. Like, that thing should be worth like $200 now, even if it's selling on eBay for $600, because it's not what was originally printed on it anymore. If you have Little Samson or Hagane or Mega Man X3 or DuckTales 2 and the label's starting to come off, don't put a new label on it. Try to make the one that's on there look as good as possible. That's how you'll retain the most value for the game.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, it's stuff like...
How did I get to that point? I'm so fired up. My knees are so sweaty.
Yeah, well, it's like you said, like, for example, Chrono Trigger. Unsealed copy is worth, I don't know, hundreds of dollars. And that is an awesome RPG that I always want to support. So, every time it's re-released, be it on a PlayStation, PSN Classic re-release, Nintendo Virtual, whatever, I always end up buying it because I want to support the product. I think it's a phenomenal game. I do not want to spend hundreds of dollars on a cartridge.
I've never bought any reproductions except for things that are totally new games, like Super Mario World. There's Brutal Mario and Super Mario World Return to Dinosaur Land that people made on their own computers.
ROM hacks.
Yes, but then they actually put them on a cartridge.
Yep.
So I've paid for those. But I don't think that the market is going to be there in 3 years. I would be really surprised if these NES games held their value, because we're just like the bubble's going to pop.
You think so?
I absolutely think so. I think people are going to figure out other ways to play these games, and they're going to realize that they're being just gouged. Like, it's almost like a monopoly where every single store will see, hey, some copy of Hagane went for $700 a few months ago. Let's set ours at that. And they all do it together.
Yeah.
And nobody is undercutting each other. They're just all like as soon as a new high sale point goes for that game, that just becomes the price of the game. And I think that game stores and collectors who are trying to make profits are getting too greedy, where the recreational collectors have now been phased out of the market. And there's no way that industry can support itself if it doesn't have the fringe people who only kind of think it's cool and don't do it as a lifestyle. Like I capped out at a few $100s for games, and I regret doing that. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't really want to sell them because it's my collection, but I feel like the choice to sell your game is way harder than the choice to just not buy it in the first place. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I shouldn't have bought DuckTales 2 for the NES for $190, but now that I did, that's my copy of DuckTales 2 that's really rare, and I don't really want to get rid of it.
Yeah. And I think that it's not just you.
Which is why I'm part of the problem of why these prices are going up, because now I've bought my thing, I don't want to sell it, so the only 3 out there are from these price gougers that are trying to flip an insane profit.
Yeah, and I think you're also not in the minority, because I think that your thinking of how that product works is one of the big reasons GameStop is kind of dying. I used to be an assistant manager at a GameStop. That was my first job out of college.
First job, and he went to assistant manager immediately.
Well, I started as a regular. Eventually,
he started as a regular, but he worked his way up there. Sounds like a sitcom. Real rags to riches story. The assistant manager at GameStop.
But I just remember, fresh out of college, and, I'd see these kids trade in, brand new games that they just spent $65 on, and we'd give them $30 credit. Like, they would literally be throwing $35 away.
Why not just rent it?
Well, my GameStop was in a more affluent neighborhood. One of our regulars, the store has since closed up, but one of our regulars was some Middle Eastern prince. He was a little kid, and he'd literally come in and buy 10 brand new games, and the next day he'd sell back 9 of them. Money was no object to him. But just I see these kids doing it, and I remember thinking to myself, as a fresh out of college broke young adult, I was like, man, this is terrible. Like, why would you ever do this? But then I recall, as a kid, I money was I had no grasp of money. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was like, I'm not really playing this game. I know I spent $65 on it, but if I can get $15 back and put it towards another game I want to play, it was worth it. Obviously that changes as you get older, and I think it's kind of the same mind frame where, collectors have all these games, but man, at a certain point, if that bubble bursts, there's just no way they're going to recoup value.
No, I mean, I'm not expecting to, but I've never been in the video game collection market to make a profit. I sold some of my current gen games, some of my PS3 games when I was in college, because I was in college and I had very, very little money and I wanted to be able to put gas in my car. That's why I sold them. I never sold them trying to make a profit, but I'm just holding them. So that's fewer that are going to be out there and being sold. Nobody who actually wants these games are selling them. So that means the only sellers are people with predatory mindsets who are just in it for the money. And capitalism, more power to you. It's just not having the effect on the video game, the retro market, that I would like to see it have. And Maybe I should sell my games that I have that are worth a few hundred each and try to buy them back in 3 years when I see, my prediction comes true and the market crashes. The only reason I don't want to now is because the prices have stayed level. They haven't kept going up, and after taxes and eBay fees and stuff, I'm gonna end up losing money on them.
Yeah.
So I don't.
What's your most prized possession, retro game that you've collected? What's your most prized possession? Give me a couple.
I have a complete in box Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Time, Mega Man X3, DuckTales 2. Those are some of the more valuable ones. What I do really like in my collection is Sunset Riders, because that's not something that I just bought. It's been in my library since I was a kid.
Nice.
And it's
like a shoot 'em up kind of game, right? Like a Western.
Yeah. So it's like a Western shoot 'em up where you're going left to right. Check it out. It's a problem because that's been named on so many hidden gem lists for retro video game players that it's not a hidden gem anymore.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm trying to think. I like Hyperstone Heist for Sega Genesis because it's not as good as Turtles in Time, so people kind of forget about it, but it's 99% as good as Turtles in Time in a different game. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty cool. It would be like Super Mario World is my favorite game of all time. If I just all of a sudden discovered they had made a sister game to that for the Sega Genesis that was almost exactly the same and played just as well, I would be very interested in that.
Yeah, the Turtles in Time is just an interesting one. That's, we already had our subject a couple episodes back about things we loved as kids that we don't love as much now. I put so much time into Turtles in Time. I love that game. And then I remember in college, the HD remaster came out or something along those lines. It was Turtles in Time, but with a fresh coat of paint on it.
Was it on the GameCube?
No, I think it was a digital only game. You could only buy it off the Xbox Marketplace or the PSN store.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what edition or release you're talking about. I do know that for some reason HD remakes are just never as good. I don't think Crash Bandicoot was as good as I remember it. Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, just I do remember that game, and how much is that? You said it's sealed, original.
It's not sealed, but it it has the original box, the original casing inside, and the original manual and stuff. It's probably 110 or 120. I mean, it's nothing crazy.
Who's your favorite Ninja Turtle?
Donatello.
Oh, nice. He's my favorite.
All right. Looks like I just made a friend.
But yeah, we should play Turtles in Time sometime.
Well, we should play Hyperstone Heist. Have you ever played it?
I actually have not played that.
It's almost as good as Turtles in Time.
But yeah, that whole era of Ninja Turtles. For the record, I really hate the new look Ninja. Have you seen the new look Ninja Turtles?
Well, it was filmed in my hometown of Buffalo, so.
Wait, what? Filmed?
Yeah, the new movie.
No, not the new.
The latest movie was filmed in
the newest cartoon.
No, I don't watch cartoons. I'm 26.
Really?
I just play games and watch wrestling or play with my action figures. Woo! It's hot in here.
But if you ever get the time, look up the new Nickelodeon Ninja Turtles.
Nickelodeon, dude. They went downhill ever since SpongeBob went off the air.
Isn't SpongeBob still on the air?
Maybe. I do know that they had some real trouble with the voice behind Dora the Explorer. I mean, she was just an 8-year-old girl at the time, but they really took advantage of her monetarily, maybe sexually.
Ooh.
But because an 8-year-old girl, I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't watched Nickelodeon since probably Hey Arnold. I never got into SpongeBob. I'm never really understood the appeal of SpongeBob.
There were
Even when I
like
was
3
young.
different things that we started talking about, and I either just interrupted you trying to be funny, or I got too worked up and started talking about something else,
It's all right.
and we didn't get
It's your
to...
show.
Boy, I hope the audio worked this week.
Yeah, that was when you texted me that night after we recorded and told me.
Yeah, you were upset. I know. All I got back was a little angry devil face emoji. We should have led with the retro video game collection discussion.
That was a fun one.
Yeah. Well, in editing, we'll switch it around and go second with WCW.
Yeah, do we have time for just one last quick topic that I want to that we?
Yeah, as long as it's not more than 45 minutes.
It won't be. But DeMarcus Cousins going to the Warriors.
I said we weren't going to talk about LeBron James.
We're not talking about LeBron James. We're not.
All right.
We are ignoring LeBron going to LA. DeMarcus Cousins going to the Warriors. Assuming he can buck the trend and actually come back from an Achilles injury, because that's I've seen everywhere that, I've been fortunate enough never to suffer it, but I've read that it is by one of the most devastating injuries an athlete can have.
I would probably take an Achilles injury if I got to play in the NBA.
Fair enough. But just coming back, so either way, okay, so let's say DeMarcus comes back, Boogie comes back, and you mentioned this. I honestly cannot think of a more talented starting 5 than what the Warriors would trot out with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, and DeMarcus Cousins. Like, in the history of basketball, I honestly cannot think.
Maybe, I don't know if Bill Walton ever started a game for the 85-86 Celtics, but maybe you take out Danny Ainge and you put in there, and just as far as sheer name power, you've got DJ, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, and Bill Walton. I mean, those are 5 guys on the same team.
True. Yeah, I mean, I've always to me, the 86 Celtics are the greatest NBA team of all time. Like, that's to me, that's always been them.
I think if they didn't move the 3-point line in for the 95-96 Bulls, then they would be. But when you've got Steve Kerr, who is maybe the most accurate 3-point shooter of all time, and you've now moved the 3-point line in a little bit.
Help him out, yeah.
Plus Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, who are probably the most dynamic pairing of teammates ever, and now make it easier for them to shoot 3-pointers when you couldn't stop them anyway. Plus, one of the greatest rebounders of all time. I'm going to go 95-96 Bulls. If they never moved the 3-point line in, though, I think that the 85-86 Celtics would have been.
All right. But yeah, man, this current iteration of the Warriors is kind of ridiculous. And what I wanted to ask you was, do you think, the
Cavs will still make the playoffs next year? Probably.
I think they can. But, see, you got dangerously close talking about LeBron there.
Who? Just kidding. As I'm not a LeBron fan, I'm not a Lakers fan. Now I am a Cavs fan. But no matter what had to happen, the Cavs won a title.
Yeah,
and you can go on all you want about what a bum Kevin Love is now, and we could have had Wiggins instead. I also said
Wiggins ain't that great either.
I said and I never do that.
Because you're fired up, man.
I hate it when people refer to pro sports teams as we. Like, you've never played. I've never played for the Cavaliers.
Okay, so what I wanted to ask.
Yeah, they got rid of Wiggins. They won a title. I don't care if LeBron has left and the team is in disarray now. Like, a title was won.
Yeah. I mean, that's like me. I'm a Mavs fan, and these last few years, they've been absolutely horrible, but I'll always have 2011.
Yeah, and you still get to watch Dirk run around out there, too.
Hobble around. I think Dirk describes himself as a mummy running in wet cement. But what I wanted to ask, so Boogie going to the Warriors, do you think, I mean, obviously it's bad for competitive balance if Boogie's healthy. Do you think, I see so much hate just thrown at the Warriors, and, I'm bitter at the Warriors about 2007 when the Mavs won 67 games and lost in the first round to the 8-seed Warriors.
Oh, man, I was a huge 8-seed Warriors fan. Monte Ellis.
I mean, yeah, Monte Ellis.
Jason Richardson, dude.
Baron Davis.
Al Jefferson. Nope.
Al Harrington.
Al Harrington.
Yeah.
Al Jefferson is the Charlotte.
Yes. No, Pacers.
He played for the Charlotte at one time, I bet.
Maybe. But
Al Harrington looks like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Can we get a picture of Al Harrington on screen?
Yeah, a little bit.
Any like podcast I've ever watched, a picture of Al Harrington would just pop up right here. I don't really know what happened or why it didn't work there.
I think our producer's watching The Bachelorette, so
boy, my knees are sweaty. I don't know why.
But I see all these people grousing about, just unfair. Like, well, I don't know. Like, why do we hate greatness? The Warriors drafted their star team, and they created a culture that attracted Kevin Durant and Boogie Cousins. I don't get the hate for them. Like, yeah, they're probably going to win the title next year.
Yeah, okay, they're going to win the title, but as of right now, okay, 3 of 4 is pretty impressive. It's all been against the same team, and the Cavaliers were one of those series away from tying it up.
Yeah.
So, like, when you think about it, there's only one scenario in which the last 4 seasons could have been any closer than they are now. Like,
so you don't think the Warriors are nearly as dominant as people kind of just whine about?
I mean, they lost a finals. Like,
yeah.
So
after winning 73 games, yeah,
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 and for everybody, just going on about how the NBA needs to be a 1 through 16 thing, and get rid of the only 8 teams making it in the West. Okay, so after 2011, which Dirk's Mavs won. After that, okay, this is Eastern, and then this is Western. So we had Heat, Spurs, Warriors,
Thunder. Thunder made the finals once, right?
No. I'm saying as far as winning.
Oh, okay.
So it was Heat, Spurs, Warriors, Cavs, Warriors. 4-3. Like, how much closer over the last 7 years could it possibly be? Like, it couldn't be. It is as even as it could possibly be over the last 7 years in terms of how many finals the East has won compared to the West.
I agree with you.
How much more parity do you want?
I agree wholeheartedly with you, but that is going to be an unpopular opinion based on the feedback I've seen, just on all the stories I've read about the Warriors adding talent.
Okay, well, let them add talent. If the Warriors win the next 20 Stanley Cups here, I couldn't think of the name of the Larry O'Brien trophy. So Warriors in the Super Bowl for the next 20 years, if nobody is able to take them down, like, then we'll have a discussion. I mean, this just happens in sports. Like, the NFL didn't reorganize when the Patriots were cheating their way to a Super Bowl win every year.
Okay, calm down, buddy.
They didn't. They let them ride it out until they were able to stop the Patriots from doing enough illegal things that we finally started getting some just Super Bowl results.
You say that, and the Patriots are one stupid Seattle Seahawks call and one epic collapse by the Falcons away from having lost 5 straight Super Bowls?
Plus, they got smoked by the 85 Bears and the 96 Packers. So their record in Super Bowls should be like 1-11. And I want to know how the same people rooting for Tom Brady say that LeBron isn't the GOAT because his finals record isn't that good. If Tom Brady, we've now established that the Patriots are 3-8 in Super Bowls all time.
No, they're not. What are you talking about?
Well, okay, let's just assume that the
Patriots are 5-4 all time, I think. They've lost 3 in the Brady era, and they got blown out by one of those Bears teams. I think that's it.
They lost to Brett Favre's only Super Bowl.
Was that the Patriots?
Yeah, Patriots with Curtis Martin and Drew Bledsoe. There was Reggie White, Dorsey Levens.
So 2 to Eli.
Gosh darn it. Who was the wide receiver?
Desmond Howard? No, he got MVP.
He was the punt returner, but they gosh darn it. Antonio Freeman?
I don't know, man. I will readily admit I'm not nearly as big an NFL fan as I am NBA fan, but
I think it was Antonio Freeman.
It sounds like a football player's name.
Yeah. Coincidentally, also the name of the guy behind the Rey Mysterio mask.
Really?
No.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Anything else?
No, I'm good.
All right. I'm too worked up. I'm too hot, too sweaty to continue. Big news in the NHL. Sabres finally trade Ryan O'Reilly, and people thought that at most they were going to get a second-round pick. They ended up getting 3 players, a first round and a second round. Sabres with the first pick of the draft this year. They are looking up, boys. I would say that they have a better chance of winning the Stanley Cup this upcoming year than the Phoenix Suns do winning the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I think that I don't know nearly enough about hockey, but the hockey does not have a Warriors equivalent.
No, but the Oilers were pretty stacked in the 80s. And Paul Coffey and Grant Fuhr and Mark Messier and Wayne Gretzky.
I heard that Gretzky guy was pretty good.
The Gretzky boys. All right, wrap them up while I hobble over to the thing and shut it off.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thanks for doing, however, listening or watching.